Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I am A.A. Ron, and this is the Inclusive Dad Podcast, where we explore inclusion to make it practical. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe, rate, or review the show on your favorite platform. We truly appreciate your feedback and would be honored if you shared the podcast with friends and family who might benefit. If you want to support us in our mission, please click on the link in the show description. Today, my guest is Rahz Slaughter. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Aaron, thank you. I appreciate it. Looking forward to being here.
Yeah. Why don't you start off by telling me a little bit about yourself?
Oh, wow, that's a loaded question, but I would say that I'm a guy who just loves to have fun. I've been working on myself for a long time, so I like to share my story of overcoming obstacles and turning them to opportunities for success. I work with teens and parents, helping them just empower and inspire their teens to create the best versions of themselves by uniquely accepting who they are from the inside out.
That's great. Why don't you start off with the first question is what is your definition of inclusion?
Wow, I love that. I know that we were talking about that. I guess my definition of inclusion is accepting a person for who they are and how they show up and being willing to embrace your own unique abilities. So when you truly embrace your own unique abilities, you can include others as they are, not excluding them for who you think they should be.
That's great. Has that kind of always been your definition, you think, or has it changed over time?
Whew. Well, I mean, I grew up with my right leg shortening. I have a disability where my right leg is shorter than the other by 3.5 inches, and I have no
Okay.
quadricep or hamstring. So I guess I always wanted to be included. I'd never felt included. I felt different. And growing up in the early 80s, mid 90s, a lot of teachers, people, coaches, they excluded me. They
Sure.
told me I wasn't normal. I was different. I wasn't going to be like all the other kids. So I learned early on that I wanted to be just normal.
Mm-hmm.
And being normal for me meant just being accepted. So when I learned what inclusion was, I really am a true fighter for it, whether it's on from the stage or working with parents or just in my everyday life, because I truly do believe that we all are unique and special. Some of us just happen to have our uniqueness on the outside, and it shows up every day, and it allows for people who are, I would say, ignorant to the fact that we need to include everybody to treat us as equals.
Yeah, that's great. So growing up, you said it was kind of tough for you. How did your parents handle like you having a disability? Do they talk about it a lot or just not? I mean, how can you talk a little bit about how your parents handled it from your
Absolutely.
perspective?
Well, I mean, I was raised with my grandmother from the age of
Okay.
13 till adulthood, and my grandmother had a second grade education. So she told me through everything the way she acted, her values and beliefs. So she said, "You're not different. You're just like everyone else. Get out there, have a good time, play,
Hmm.
fall, run, do all the things that everybody else did." Because
Right.
anytime someone told me I couldn't, she told me I could. I could recall a story when I was in the seventh grade. I wanted to play soccer, and the school said, "We can't allow him to play soccer. He's going to get hurt." She goes, "He's going to play soccer and we'll sign any rights, any disclosures, anything you need so that he can be just like the other kids." And she was always showing me through actions, not just through words. And that's where I learned a lot of my values and beliefs about just going after things, and never allowing my limiting beliefs or limitations physically to hold me back.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great role model for you for sure. That's great. So did you, when you were going to school and growing up, did you see anybody else that kind of looked like you, or did you kind of always um, have struggle finding other people that were had disabilities or looked like you?
Yeah, Aaron, I definitely didn't go to a school that had any other children who had disabilities or physical challenges.
Sure.
But what I can say is that I was blessed I went to a school district that was, I wouldn't say inclusive, but they worked hard at trying to be
Sure.
inclusive. And by doing so, sometimes it made me feel a little bit awkward. And it made me feel different just because they were trying so hard rather than just accepting me for who I was and allowing me to be. But I think when I think back to that, it really helped me develop the resilience to push forward, to accept myself, and then to start to be able to articulate, hey, I'm okay with you asking questions about who I am, what my
Yeah.
disability is, and moving forward and embracing my abilities.
Yeah. That's awesome. So get how did you get on the path of trying to help others with their challenges and stuff and overcome them? What got you started on that?
It really was. It's a story where, I mean, I just love I started working out because I realized that that was going to be the key to me having a long, fruitful, healthy, active
Sure.
life.
Yep.
And so I started studying as early as I could. I remember reading books on yoga, on Pilates, on all kinds of different ways to strengthen my back, because I
Sure.
had a doctor when I was in an early age tell me I was going to be in a wheelchair by the time I'm 18, due to
Okay.
the fact that when you have such a disparity between your right and left side, you're going to create some imbalances.
Sure.
And then that kind of drove me into my first career, which was exercise physiology and anatomy, and becoming a personal trainer. And becoming a personal trainer allowed me really to take this disability, turn it into an ability, where people
Hmm.
were inspired by the things that I could do in the gym, and it
Right.
built me a business. And I didn't know that that was going to be a blessing, but I turned that obstacle into an opportunity for a fruitful career.
That's great. So did you early on? Do you remember? I don't know if you can remember it, but did you have like special shoes or something to try to make it so you didn't have a limp and stuff like that?
Yeah, I was one of
Okay.
the first people in the United States to have something called the Elizaroff. And it was
Okay.
by a doctor, a Russian doctor. And for the listeners, it's basically I had 5 rings. I had 22 pins that went through
Oh,
my
yeah.
bones, and it had a crank. And this
Hmm.
crank was the first job was to straighten the leg
Yep.
and then lengthen it. The first part of the procedure was 6 months, 6 months of total pain, man. I can tell you that I remember every morning when they turned it, it hurt. And I was excited because the doctors told me, you know what, you're going to be fixed, you're going to be normal. But after
Hmm.
6 months of being in the hospital, and now I have a straight leg, I asked a very, I guess I thought a simple question at that age was, now that my leg is straight, how am I going to keep it that way?
Right.
And the doctors looked at me and said, hey, well, this was a success. You're going to wear a brace the rest of your life. And I knew from that answer, Aaron, that it just was not the case. That was not the reality that I
Right.
wanted for myself. So I
Right.
decided at that point I was not going to wear a brace. I was not going to wear a lift on my shoe. I was going to walk on my tippy toes because that was the way that I was born, and that was the way that I was going to adapt.
Right. How old were you when that stuff happened?
So I had this surgery when I was mid 12, right into
Okay.
my 13th birthday. And then after 6 months, they allowed me a break, 2 weeks in between going back to have the leg lengthen.
Right.
And I went to Long Island and spent that 2 weeks with my grandmother. And she told me, she said, God made you this way. I don't
Right.
want you to ever be any other way. And I have
Right.
never had another surgery on my leg again.
Yeah. I didn't know the name of that, but I've heard of it before. So yeah, I have a daughter, Cecilia. She's 22. She was diagnosed with epilepsy and then cerebral palsy when she was younger. So she has AFOs, which she wears sometimes. And then she had at least one surgery on her foot and leg, probably over 10 years ago. So um, definitely had to go through some surgeries. So that's a lot of work. I mean, it's interesting your perspective though, where I mean, you're older, you kind of remember all of it, and that was cool. They gave you the op. I mean, you decided to not do it and just keep going forward with life like that. So that's pretty cool.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't say that it was all me. I don't know what your faith or your listeners, but
Yep.
my grandma was very faith based,
Yep.
and she just truly believed that God makes us unique and special, and we don't need to change that. And
Yep.
and I believe that I was being told lies. There was no way to fix a leg that doesn't have. Now I have a degree in exercise physiology now, so I know if you don't
Right.
have a quad and a hamstring, you're not going to be able to flex or extend your
Oh,
leg,
sure. Okay.
and they forgot to tell me that little piece early on
Right.
before having the surgery.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's crazy. So yeah, you do a lot. You talk with parents and about parenting and stuff. Do you have any tips for, let's say, so my background is I didn't know anything about. I don't remember hearing anything about like disability, the word being spoken, or seeing people in wheelchairs. I don't remember special education classes when I was in school. So I was born in 77. So I just don't remember any of that stuff. So when my daughter was born, it was just kind of all new to me. And I mean, I have a son who's 15 months older. He was healthy, did nothing like that. So that was my first experience being a parent. Then my daughter's born. Do you have any tips or stuff for like parents such as myself? You know, you all of a sudden are in this new world of something different that you weren't expecting, and some of that stuff. Like, how do you, any tips for parents on how to navigate that stuff and how to, like your grandma did, just, focus on, what you can do and how you are, you're perfect the way you are and that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. I will, any of the parents that are listening, I will never say that I can understand. I think that
Yeah.
we all have a unique experience with anything and any challenge we have. But it
Right.
does start with our belief systems. And if you're
Right.
a parent who is having a child who has special needs, you have to first examine your own belief systems. What is possible? Because if you don't see the possibilities, it's going to be very difficult for you to transpose that energy, that positivity to your child. And
Right.
they're going to feel your energy. And if you have limiting beliefs about that, they're going to feel and experience that as well. And because, and I always share my grandmother's story, because a lot of times when we're educated, when we feel like we know something, then we start to try to impose that belief. My grandmother, she just said, "Hey, baby, you going to be you. You do
Right.
you." And when she said that, that meant me breaking cast, me falling down. She never ran over and picked me up. So if you're
Right.
a parent with a kid, allow them to live. Try to get them
Right.
to be exposed. One of my clients has CP, and this young man has been able to do so many amazing things over the last few years because we don't limit. His mother is amazing. And with the coaching that I provide him, he just sees his possibilities. He doesn't see those limits that other people want to impose upon him.
Right. Yeah. It is interesting because I know, just from my experience, my journey, I mean, she had seizures and pretty bad seizures when she was younger, which I think kind of colored my, how I treated her, I guess, thinking back, because I would be a lot more, they call it now like helicopter parent, just always kind of watching, paying attention for seizures, which I think is a good thing. But then at the same time, I do realize that I, didn't, like when I was a kid. I mean, you go outside and my parents let me do stuff. You fall down, yeah, you just get up and brush it off and keep moving. Where more, I was more kind of worried about bad stuff happening, so I kind of try to protect, quote unquote, protect her. So that is a very good. It's an interesting balancing act, I guess. Do you have any tips on like? I don't know if it was like limiting beliefs, but I feel like mine was more just overprotecting. Probably. Do you have any tips for that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it was overprotecting. You were doing what a parent
Right.
should do, right? You were doing the best you can with the information and the resources and the
Yep.
experience you had. I'm sure that you can support the community more than I can specifically on this
Right.
topic, mainly because yes, I've got to serve a lot of families who, because of my own story, they are attracted to me. I
Yep.
will say that you just have to see what their strengths are and really
Yep.
feed into those things, because when we feed into
Yeah.
those strengths, they can use that experience to create new opportunities and blast through some of the challenges that society will try to put on them.
Right.
And that's where, and every overcoming or any obstacle they overcome becomes a new opportunity for them to try something new and explore that opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you think, in your grandma's life or in her like journey got her to that point where she was, she kind of got those or passed those beliefs on to you? Was there something in like her upbringing that kind of you think got her to that point?
Absolutely. I mean, she was born in Montgomery, Alabama, in
Okay.
a time where we were segregated. We were people of
Yep.
color were discriminated, and she
Yep.
had dogs sicked on her. She had hoses sprayed on her, but she really believed that she loved all people.
Right.
And we had a 1 bedroom apartment on Long Island, and she would welcome everybody. We didn't have a lot of money or food, but she would always be
Right.
willing to share what she had. And she showed me that core values are the essential part of a character of a person. And
Sure.
I've taken that and I've shared that with my family and my boys. And I consistently share that with the parents that I get to serve, is that we have to evaluate our beliefs, our core values, and that's how we're going to impose or impart the wisdom that we need on our children.
Yeah, for sure. Is Montgomery, Alabama, where the Civil Rights Museum is?
Yes, it absolutely is.
Okay.
She was in Montgomery and right near Mobile,
Okay.
she would say.
Mobile. Yeah. So last April, I've always wanted to go to the NASCAR race in Talladega, so we went down to Talladega and we stopped at the Civil Rights Museum. So that was pretty. Um, I'd never been anything like that before, and it was just interesting to read and see, all the history like right there in that area, and right across the street in the park is where a lot of that stuff happened, and the church bombing right there and everything. So that was quite a couple
Absolutely.
hours of pretty intense reading stuff, and it's like, wow, that actually happened, and it's like, well, yeah. So
Where
that
it's mind blowing to think
it
that
is, yeah,
it happened, and for people who have special needs, a
yes,
lot of it's still going on right now
yeah,
for them.
yeah. That's the. I mean, I've done a little bit like reading about some history about like disability and stuff, and find out that a lot of the eugenic stuff or the forced sterilization of people with disabilities. We talk about other countries doing it, but it also happened in here in the U.S. and you just never hear that, and it's kind of humbling to, this is a lot of crazy stuff happened.
For sure.
Yeah.
100%.
Um, in your experience, what is the most common misconception parents have about raising challenging teenagers?
Ooh, that they're not motivated. So a lot of parents feel that teenagers are not motivated, and the challenge that I've been able to help them unpack is that they're just not motivated by the things that we're motivated by or believe they should be motivated by.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, you need to get good grades. You need to be focused on
Yeah.
activities outside. We went outside and we played in the snow and we did this or that, right?
Yeah.
You're in Minnesota, so you know.
Yeah.
But I think that, if you're going to be a parent and you're listening to this, there are no unmotivated teenagers. We just,
Right.
as parents, it's our job to find what motivates them, what stimulates them, and that's how we're going to build that connection and lessen that conflict.
So what are some strategies to help figure out like what they're motivated by?
So one of the things that I truly believe is communication. You have to actively
Yeah.
ask questions, and you can't ask one question. It's a questions in threes, because kids today, and you have, an early teen, or you have two kids, right?
Yep.
And when you ask them questions, I'm all right, it's good, yeah, it's okay, everything's good, like one
Yeah.
or two word answers, right? You have to be ready to fire off a couple, but not
Sure.
interrogate them. You want to
Right.
be able to connect with them, actively listen, and then it's going to be your job to find things that are interesting to them.
Right.
We find things that are, you said you were born in 77 as so we're both
Okay.
in our late mid 40s,
Yep.
like things are different today. I call it the modern teenage world. Like, we have to be able, like, they don't even
Right.
speak English. I mean, I had a kid tell me, he goes, "Oh yeah, Chally." I was like, "What is Chally?" He goes, "Oh, challenge." I was like, "That is not a full word." I was like, "Come on, at least
Yeah.
pronunciate your words if you're going to
Right.
speak." But I had to learn to cut words down with them and just have a good time and
Yeah.
adapt my own communication style.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. I start talking now. I'm talking about stuff like then I say something. I'm like, man, I sound like I'm getting old. Like everything was way cheaper, and I didn't have phones, and like, oh man, I'm getting old.
Yeah, I definitely catch myself saying very similar conversations with myself. Wow, I can't believe I just said that, and then it happens.
So so let's say I find out that my child is not motivated by like the typical. Going to school, getting good grades, wanting to go to college, be a doctor. They're maybe I'm coming to me as I'm saying it out loud. So maybe they want to be like an artist or something. But as a parent, you get these pressures, from
Mhm.
outside pressures from society, from the school. Their kid has to take all these classes, get good grades to do this, to do this, to do this. How as a parent, do you have tips on how you can support your teenager to go down that path while at the same time having to navigate that kind of stuff?
Great question. First, I always tell parents that teens, kids, children in general, they're going to do and model what you do and say. So too often, if we're trying to tell them, hey, you need to get good grades, you need to have goals, you need to be motivated, you need to be active, first and foremost, we got to take a look in the mirror.
Right.
Are we doing those things?
Right.
Are we leading that life? Because if we're not leading that life, they're not going to do what we say. They're going to do what we do.
Right.
And then when you find a kid who is creative, who is artistic, who is more musical, all of these things, those are the things you want to go, okay, that's great. And then you want to come up with your own core family values. One of our core family values is effort is more important than grades.
Right.
And though my boys are in college now, and my wife went back, I've gone back, I really truly believe that it's about learning. It's not about the grade.
Right.
So we talk in our family about what's your class? What are you learning in that class? Although if you get a C in that class, it's okay. Did you give your best effort? Right. If you gave your best effort, I'll accept that C all day, every day, twice on Sunday.
Right. Yeah, I have similar conversations with my children too. Like, I mean, just do your best. I mean, that's all I ask. Just do your best. Be respectful and do your best. That's my things. Because yeah,
for sure.
That's also true though. Because I mean, I see you're saying like, hey, you need to get good grades, and then you're under your breath, you're talking to your partner or spouse like, this whole school system is dumb. And then as your kids are going to school, they're getting mixed messages. So you need to for sure, not do that.
Yeah,
kind of stuff either.
and Aaron, kids are smarter today. They're exposed to more. You and I, we didn't have the Wi-Fi and the internet and the cell phone that you could look anything up. We had to go to, and like I joke, but we had like Encyclopedia Britannica, right? And and you had to look things up and the Dewey Decimal System. So like I think if your parents and they're listening and watching the show, it's so imperative that we level up as parents.
For sure.
We have to upgrade from Windows 7 to at least Windows 11 if we want to be able to communicate and connect with our kids.
Yeah, for sure. That's funny about the encyclopedias because I kind of brought that up recently when people are, AI and that kind of stuff. Well, the kids are using AI to do all the reports. I'm like, I remember in 8th grade going to my parents' house or my grandparents' house to use their Encyclopedia Britannicas. The difference was I had to like write down word for word to cite in my paper instead of like just using AI to do it or like, copying it off the internet and citing it correctly. And like, it's just technology is moving. We did the same thing. It was just harder for us to do it because it was actually a book we had to pull off the shelf. So
we had to do a little bit more legwork.
A little more legwork, yeah, for sure. Why do you believe developing confidence is the most important skills for adolescent to teenager?
This is one of my favorite topics, questions. I could talk about it for a year. I believe that the reason I believe is that because there's a misconception of what confidence is. Confidence isn't what we think it is. It isn't the celebrity that's on the red carpet or the arrogant person who doesn't know who they are and they're not humble. Confidence is just true love oneself, embracing your unique strengths, your limitations, but also being self-aware of what you need and want and being able to articulate that to your friends, your peers, your family, your coworkers, whomever it is. And when you're able to impart confidence, true confidence in a team, their life changes because they no longer are waiting, wishing, and hoping someone's going to validate who they are. Right. See, that is why we have bullies. That is why we have so many people that don't love themselves today. And I can tell you, before I was working with teens, I was coaching actors, celebrities, people in New York City that are high CEO and C-suite. And I realized that a lot of them were faking the funk, my man. And I wanted to be able to say, hey, you know what? You're coming to me, you're telling me about all your woes and your things you're not. What if I were able to impart my influence, wisdom on you at an earlier age? Maybe you be stronger and it's more accepting of who you are.
Right. No, that's a great point because I mean, I just until the last couple of years, just gotten more into not worrying about what other people think of me and trying to figure myself out. And if I would have been able to figure that stuff out as a teenager or way younger, it would have had a lot. I mean, obviously, I would have probably done stuff differently. So that's very important to learn those things or help people when they're younger for sure.
That's cool. Yeah, and think about it. I mean, the kids today, they have all of these resources. Yep. We have Instagram, Snapchat, all the social media platforms that are telling people what they need to be. We had some magazines. I had the
Yeah.
workout magazines, and I had
Yeah.
but we all had to share them, right? We didn't have
Yeah.
such access. Now every day they're telling them, oh, you're not enough, you're not enough, you're not smart enough, you're not tall enough, you're not good looking enough. So we need kids to be confident in who they are, so that
For
they
sure.
don't allow that outside noise to affect them.
Yeah, for sure. Um, what is your what is your like big goal, or what are you working towards? What do you want to keep expanding what you're doing, or do you have what's your big goals?
Whew. Well, I guess I like to keep them short. Like, I don't
Okay.
want to go too far out, but I think the big goal right now is in 2025, I will be hosting an event called Empowered Live. And that invite is going to
Okay.
be 100 teens. And for listeners are definitely probably familiar with Tony Robbins, he
Yep.
has an event called UPW, Unleash the Power Within.
Okay.
It's my long-term goal is to have thousands of teens go through this experience. So within 72 hours, we can take them from shy, introverted to unstoppable, because now they have the tools, the resources, and the belief in themselves that they can actually shine no matter who they are or what someone else believes they are.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. Have you done a TEDx talk?
I have not done a TEDx
No.
talk, but I definitely is something that's in the goals
Yeah.
and on that list of something. I don't want to be similar. I really have a deep passion for eradicating bullying
Yep.
and believing that it really comes from the 6 inches between our ears. So that's something that I would love to partake in at some point.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, I've done two of them now, and the first one that I did 10 years ago, that was one of the top five experiences of my life. So yeah, if that's something you're interested in, I would highly encourage you to do it. It was a lot of fun and very talked about a lot of stuff I'd never talked about in public before. So it was um, very emotional for me, but I really enjoyed it. So yeah, that's great. Is there anything that we haven't talked about you want to talk about?
Well, I think we hit some great points, but I think that it's just, I want to thank you for allowing me to share
Yeah.
and inspire your listeners. And if I can, I always like to share one of my favorite quotes is by Helen
Sure.
Keller. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all. And I remember listening and watching the movie of Helen Keller and learning about her story. And it really inspired me to understand that I can embrace my unique abilities, my disability, turn it into an ability. And for the parents and the listeners out there and the dads out there, truly look inwardly to see your own limiting beliefs so that you can expose them, reinforce them, change them, refine them so that you don't pass them on to your children. Because that's a lot of that's how they're actually receiving a lot of the information that we have not done on the work on ourselves.
Absolutely. That's great. One other question I asked all my guests is, what is one tip you can share to help our listeners be more inclusive today? So just something simple. You don't have to spend money or like take a class. Just one thing they can start today doing to be more inclusive.
Absolutely. The biggest thing is smile at people. Just
There you
smile.
go.
People want to be seen. You don't if you walk by someone who's in a wheelchair or has crutches or a walker, don't look away.
Right.
Don't give them eye contact and show them that you see them, you are experience that human moment with them. That is so impactful. And I think that I know for me personally, when someone gave me that, I was on crutches until I was 12 and a half, almost
Sure.
13. It made me feel good that people didn't see me as something that I was broken, but that I was whole and unique, and that was special for me.
That's awesome. Ready for one more question?
Let's rock and roll.
Do you like spam? Yes or no?
Oh my God. At the current point in my life, no. This chapter, no. But there was a point in my life that you could fry up some spam with eggs and some potatoes, and I would have eaten it up.
Yeah, so I live in Austin, Minnesota, which is where they make spam, where Hormel is, and there's a spam museum. So if you ever want to visit the spam museum, you got to come to Austin where I live. So I've been asking all my guests, and it's funny. It's interesting to see like the response. Usually, it's pretty hard either way. Like no, yes, it's very quick usually.
You know what? I have a real experience with it. I mean, I know what that spam looks like. I know what it is
Yeah,
in that can. And you know what? I'm not gonna say it's in it. It was tasty when I was
yeah,
growing up. So
that's That's all good. Where is the best place everybody can connect with you?
The best place is to find me on social media, Rahz Slaughter. That's Rahz, last name Slaughter, just for like the house. Or my website is called theunstoppableteenager.com.
That's great. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day, everyone.
To all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Inclusive Dad Podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, or review the show. Your feedback helps us connect with more champions of inclusion. Remember to share this podcast with friends and family who might benefit. If you want to support us in our mission, please click on the link in the show description. Together we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.